Today we're diving into Outkast's 1996 album ATLiens, diving into the music, the lyrics, the flow, seeing how this album ties directly to another important moment in music history, and seeing how this album is simultaneously an evolution for Outkast, monumental for Southern hip-hop, and an expansion of the larger genre itself. Before ATLiens, Outkast released their debut album, Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music, in 1994. This album performed well commercially and was received positively in general, but some people didn't understand it, and some didn't consider it to be real hip-hop. There was East Coast, and there was West Coast, and there was nothing in between. This, of course, was not true at all. Hip-hop may have started in New York, but by 1994, it had spread not only to the West Coast, but the South as well. Southern hip-hop is as diverse as either coast. You can't classify it as just one thing. Just like there are different styles and scenes within New York, like De La Soul is different from Biggie. But there are elements of Southern hip-hop that are different from any scene on the East or West Coasts. And many people wrote it off entirely as sounding too country or unintelligent because of the twang and the MC's accents. So Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music does sound unique for 1994, particularly because of the way it was produced. Take the single Players Ball. This was produced by Organized Noise, which, man, now I gotta do a whole other video just on them. Both Organized Noise and Outkast were part of the Dungeon family, a musical collective that included Goody Mob, Society of Soul. That's gotta be a whole other video too. There is so much to say about the Dungeon family and Organized Noise and LaFace Records, but for this story, I want to highlight Organized Noise's production style, specifically the use of live instrumentation. It's not that Organized Noise never used samples, they just preferred the sound and feel of live instruments. There could be no samples and all instruments, or maybe one sample and a lot of instruments, programmed drums and instruments, or any mix of these elements. Live instrumentation in hip-hop was not new. Groups like Stetsasonic and The Roots already did this, but it was far from standard. By and large, it was sample-based. Let's take a listen to the instrumental of Outkast's debut single from this album, Players Ball. The difference here is subtle, but it does feel different from sample-based hip-hop. Hold on to this idea, because once we get to their next album, ATLiens, well, we'll get there. The other thing I want to highlight with this song is the flow of Big Boi and Andre 3000. Now, I'm going to isolate just the vocal and clap to the beat along with it. What I want you to notice is the way the rhymes fit with that beat.
Speaking to look a lot like wood. Follow my every step. Take notes on how I crap. I was about to go in depth. This is the way I creep my season. Here's my ghetto rep. I kept, to say the least, no, it can't.
This is just part of Andre's verse, but there are two things I notice when I hear that. One is the triplet right at the beginning that he starts with. Triplets have certainly been used by MCs before. They're a good device to change up the rhythm of 8th notes or 16th notes, which feels straighter and typically comes in groups of 2 or 4. But a triplet is a faster group of 3 that allows you to squeeze more syllables in a small space. Again, other MCs have used triplets. This is not new, but triplets are seen much more in Southern rap. I mean, that's how you eventually get to the modern triplet flow that took over rap, and Outkast in particular loves a good triplet. There's just one here in this clip that I played, but where we're going, I mean, just wait. The other thing I hear is a straightforward flow. This was Andre's verse, but Big Boi's flow is similar. Their syllables land pretty squarely on the beat. This was right in line with much of the hip-hop of the time, and their delivery sounds similar to other groups like Souls of Mischief or The Pharcyde. This was an influence that Organized Noise recognized and appreciated. Because again, while the biggest commercial hip-hop labels were Bad Boy in the East and Death Row in the West, there were many, many other artists in between with different styles. But this straightforward delivery, here's my analogy. Imagine a train. It's moving down the tracks at a consistent speed. On top of the train is a person. Because their feet are touching the train, they're moving with it. But they're dancing on top of this train, given a performance. They may take a few steps forward or slide back, but they're staying with the same pace as the train. ooh, maybe they do a jump, and for a brief moment, the train moves faster than they do, but when their feet hit the train again, they're back in sync with it. The train is the beat, and the dancer is the MC. The beat is consistent, and the MC is rapping on top of this beat, giving a performance, moving around a bit, but always grounded to what the train is doing. Different MCs, or dancers, have different flows, different dance moves on top of this train. Maybe they slide a little further back, or move towards the front. Maybe they can land a backflip. I don't know, you get what I'm saying, right? So this first Outkast album, it's a little different from other hip-hop, but in a lot of ways, it's kind of similar. They're trying to put Atlanta on the map. They're rapping about life in the South, doing some things different, but they're generally playing by the rules of the hip-hop playbook. And it was working. I mean, Players Ball was a huge hit, and this album is a platinum-selling album. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And then came the 1995 Source Awards. The 95 Source Awards are an infamous moment in hip-hop. It's the epicenter and culmination of so many different movements within hip-hop. Tensions between the East and West Coasts boiled over in moments like when Suge Knight made pointed comments about Puff Daddy, or when Puff said, "I live in the East and I'm gonna die in the East." Snoop got on stage and said the East Coast ain't got no love for Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. And in the middle of it, the category of Best New Artist is announced. Outkast wins, and as they take the stage to accept the award, the crowd is booing. While accepting the award, Andre 3000 responds by saying,
But it's like this though. I'm tired of folks, you know what I'm saying? Them closed-minded folks, you know what I'm saying? It's like we got a demo tape and nobody want to hear it, but it's like this, the South got something to say. That's all I got to say.
Ludacris said that pressure can create diamonds, and when Andre said this, it created a diamond. Killer Mike said, "It was a clear-cut incision from New York wannabeism. It was a great thing because it finally cut the umbilical cord, saying that we don't need to impress or be influenced by you in the same creative way. We're gonna show you." This would lead to a rise in Southern hip-hop through the rest of the 90s, 2000s, the 2010s, all the way through today. But first, just over a year later, in 1996, Outkast would release their second album, ATLiens. An album that is no longer trying to play by the rules of the East or West Coast. It's the beginning of a new style for Outkast, not only musically, lyrically, but also fashionally. It's not a word, but you get what I mean. The title ATLiens is a combination of ATL for Atlanta and aliens because they felt alienated from hip-hop. But rather than shy away from that, they leaned into it. Take the first track, an intro titled You May Die. You got that gorgeous piano in there? This poem is in Portuguese. I mean, what a way to start an album. Check out the beginning though. Hear that little flute in there? Turns out Andre Flute Thousand's been with us this whole time. The first full song is two dope boys in a Cadillac, and right out of the gate, it feels different. Let's just talk about their flow. Here's Big Boy's verse at the beginning of the song. I'm gonna clap the beat again with the acapella. Tell me if you hear the difference.
From the bottom of my lungs, and be blowing, spitting its game. Coming up on you from the south, the ATLiens ain't changed. Cooler than most players claim to be. A nigga from the A-Town C, the home of the Bankhead bound. Coming to road in other city streets, enough of the morality, fallacy, but we speak not fiction. Keeping up pulling your guards, looking at Jerry Curse, you bitches.
Big Boy is rapping faster, there are a ton of triplets, and the whole thing feels looser. Sometimes it's not even quantifiable as a specific rhythm. He's just cramming so many syllables in there, and then he gets back on the beat. It's like if the triplet allows you to say more in a short period of time, Big Boy is taking this to the extreme and cramming in so many words, so quickly, and so effortlessly. Let's listen to Dre's verse right after.
This old sucker MC stepped up to me, challenged Andre to a battle, and I stood there patiently as he spit and stumbled over cliches, so-called freestyling. Whole purpose is to make me feel look. I guess you wild, and I say look why I ain't for that. So this, let me explain only child style, so you don't miss. I grew up to myself, not round no park bench. That say busting flows up in the apartment.
He's not rapping as fast as Big Boy, but he's using a different technique, laying so far behind the beat. You remember that train analogy from earlier? Pull up the thing. Well, on this song, between Andre's laid-back timing and Big Boy cramming so many syllables into one bar that aren't a clear-cut rhythm, Outkast isn't dancing on the train at all. They're flying in a plane above the train. They're moving with it, but they're not tied to it in the same way. They might move forward to the front car or fall behind the caboose a little bit, but they're always flying in relation to the train, but they're not constricted by it. On the hook, it references people on one side doing one thing, and on the other side doing something else, but they're in the middle, staying calm and dropping bombs. This feels like they're saying, East Coast and West Coast can bicker all they want and waste their time. We're down south making great music. This song was produced by Organized Noise, but several tracks, including the next song, ATLiens, was produced by Outkast themselves. After the success of their first album, Outkast poured time and money into musical equipment, and following Organized Noise's influence, started producing for themselves. There are some samples on this album, some interpolations, but there's a lot of live instruments. As Big Boy said, I feel like you cheat the listener when you sample. If it's an old school jam, leave it to the old. We want to have our own school of music. I don't necessarily fully agree with that. Sampling is an art form in and of itself, but I understand where he's coming from and wanting to do their own thing. But it's not just the music that's different or the flow of these two MCs that's unique. Lyrically, the hook of the song, ATLiens, references fish and grits and all that pimp shit. This is very Southern. They're from the South and they're proud. But then take Andre's last verse.
No drugs or alcohol so I can get the signal clear as day. Put my Glock away, I got a stronger weapon that never runs out of ammunition, so I'm ready for war, okay?
He's speaking out against drugs, alcohol, and guns. Just before this album, Andre quit drinking and smoking, began eating vegan, and for Big Boy, he had just had his first child, and his aunt, who he was very close with, had just passed away. This album sees Outkast taking their music to another level, leaning in on their unique style, regardless of what the rest of the hip-hop scene is doing, and even producing for themselves. This whole album is so good and so different from what was happening elsewhere in hip-hop, and it's so great because Outkast is doing what they want to do, as opposed to doing what they're, supposed to do. You really need to go listen to this whole album because it's an experience. But I want to highlight another insanely fast flow. We already looked at Big Boy's rapid fire verse in Two Dope Boys, so let's look at Andre's second verse on Elevators, parentheses me and you. Now, this song was the first single from the album, but LaFace Records didn't want it to be. So Outkast leaked it to a local radio station, and after it took off, they let them pick their own singles from then on. It's easy to see why. Let's just listen to Andre's verse.
True, I got more fans than the average man, but not enough loot to last me to the end of the week. I live by the beat like you live, check to check. If you don't move your feet, then I don't eat, so we like neck to neck. Yes, we done come a long way like them slim ass cigarettes from Virginia. This ain't gonna stop, so we just gonna continue.
Again, there's so many rhythmic differences that he's hopping between and then cramming in syllables and then goes back to a standard flow and then changes up the beat a little bit with his flow. It's that plane flying above the train. It's insane. I love it. Another one I want to highlight is Mainstream. This is produced by Organized Noise, and this beat is so good. Let's break this apart a bit. So first, here's the drums. What I want you to notice, this is just a standard drum beat. 2 and 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But the instrumentation on top of this is in 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you've got chords changing every 3 beats with drums on a 4-beat loop, but then add to it, it's a 3-measure phrase. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's unless you want to count it in 3, which then the drums get off. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. So it's either 3 bars of 4 or 4 bars of 3, depending on how you want to slice it, depending on how you hear it. This is uncommon, but it feels so good. Plus, there's that high-pitched sound at the top of everything. This reminds me of the Minnie Riperton sample on Lyrics to Go by A Tribe Called Quest. It's just quietly sitting on top of everything the whole time. Again, you should go listen to this whole album, but I'm gonna jump to the last song. Not the remix of Elevators, but the closing song on the album, 13th Floor, Growing Old. First of all, we start with piano and a spoken word by Big Rube, another member of the Dungeon family. There are multiple other Dungeon family features on this album, but this is a great album closer. It just feels like we're landing the plane. See what I did there? Just like the intro of the album, it's just this gorgeous piano. But let's look at the end of one of Andre's verses.
My mind catches flashbacks to the black past while my close laugh at the southern slang, figure eights and mojo chicken wings. I grew up on booty shake, we did not know no better things. So go ahead and diss it while real hot peppers listen. Started by African Bambada, so you and your partner gather your thoughts.
Did you catch it? He's saying that yes, they have the southern slang, stereotypes about the South, but real hip-hop fans will hear it and understand it. He even references close-minded people, just like he did at the Source Awards. Turns out the South did have something to say, and because of the Source Awards and this album leaning into Outkast differences, musically, their flow, lyrically, it contributed to Southern hip-hop being put on the map. As Killer Mike said, it freed them from being tied to New York and let the South do their own thing. The 95 Source Awards is a monumental moment in music history. The East Coast versus West Coast feud gets the most attention, but separate from Bad Boy and Death Row, there's a lot of other music tied to this day. It was not only Outkast that left the Source Awards and put out some incredible music. Questlove tells the story of leaving right at the most tense moment of the award show, when Snoop Dogg was on stage. And at that moment, he grabbed his date and headed for the door. But on the way out, someone passed him a cassette tape that turned out to be D'Angelo's Brown Sugar, which would lead to the formation of the Soulquarians. This was a collective of artists like The Roots, Common, D'Angelo, Erykah Badu, Jay Dilla, and many more. But for that whole story, you gotta click here.